had been planning a solo trip for months. Not just any trip, but one that would take me deep into the woods of northern Maine. I didn't want a campground. I didn't want picnic tables or trail signs or other hikers passing by every few hours. I wanted to be alone, really alone. I work a boring job, sit in a small cubicle 5 days a week, answer the same questions on the phone, and stare at the same calendar on the wall. I needed out. I wanted the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I didn't think much about the risks because I felt like I needed it more than anything. I wanted to go so far out that if I screamed, no one would hear it. Looking back, that last part feels a little too on the nose. I spent weeks looking at topographical maps, trying to find the kind of area that no one would bother hiking through. I didn't want a destination. I didn't want a lake or a scenic lookout or a campsite that had been used 100 times before. I wanted to walk in from an unmarked logging road, cut my own trail, and spend 5 or 6 nights on my own out there. So I picked an area about 3 hours north of Bangor. Just a tangle of trees, uneven ridges, and brush so thick you'd have to push it aside with both hands just to pass through. The closest thing to civilization out there was a faded gas station with a crooked sign and 2 rusted-out pumps. I filled up, grabbed a bottle of water from the cooler, and nodded at the old guy behind the counter as I paid. He didn't say a word. From there, I followed a dirt road that turned into gravel, then into packed mud, then just forest floor. The logging road had been used in the past, but not recently. I parked the car in a small opening just off the road, packed everything into my pack, and locked the doors. I left a small note on the dash, just my first name and the date I expected to return. I'd read enough survival stories to know that was a smart move just in case. The first day was fine. The trees were thick, but I had a good compass and a printout of the topographical map I'd marked up with a highlighter. I made it about 5 miles in before setting up camp. Nothing fancy, just a small backpacking tent, a bear bag hung high between 2 trees, and a quick meal of rice and tuna boiled over a small camp stove. I lay in the tent that night listening to the wind move through the trees. It felt exactly like what I'd hoped for. The silence was heavy but good. The second day I pushed deeper, uphill for most of the morning, and then down into a narrow valley where the undergrowth was so thick I had to slow to a crawl. I found a small stream just before sunset and set up camp nearby. My legs were sore, my shoulders were tight, but it still felt worth it. I washed my face in the cold water and ate a protein bar in the tent before falling asleep. I didn't hear anything unusual that night, just crickets and wind. The third day things started to go wrong, but not in a dramatic way, at least not at first. I woke up with a headache and a dry mouth, even though I'd drunk plenty of water. My stomach felt off, like I'd eaten something bad. I took it slow that morning, repacking everything and keeping an eye on the sun to hold my bearings. I hadn't seen another person since I left the car, and I knew I wouldn't. I hadn't seen any animals either, not even squirrels. I figured that was normal for a forest this dense. It was hard to see more than a few feet ahead with all the brush. About mid-morning, I climbed a ridge and realized my map didn't match what I was seeing. I double-checked the compass, but something felt wrong. I should have been coming up on a bend in the stream I'd followed yesterday, but it wasn't there. Just trees. I figured I'd made a mistake marking my route and kept walking, trusting that I could reorient myself later. That turned out to be a big mistake. By the afternoon, I still hadn't found the stream, and the terrain was steeper than anything I remembered seeing on the map. I climbed to the top of a narrow slope and looked around. Nothing, just trees in every direction. The sun was still up, but I couldn't tell how much daylight I had left. The sky looked hazy. I decided to stop early and camp again, thinking I'd sort it out in the morning. That night I couldn't sleep. The forest felt different. I kept hearing little sounds, snaps of branches, rustling leaves, but they never repeated. I couldn't place them. It didn't sound like animals. It was like something was out there, but every time I tried to listen hard, it went quiet. I thought maybe I was just on edge from getting turned around. I told myself to stay calm, get some rest, and find the right direction tomorrow. When I woke up on the 4th day, the headache was worse. I was sweating even though it was cold. I sat outside the tent for a while trying to drink water and eat, but my hands were shaking. I knew I had to get out of there. I packed up quickly and started walking the direction I thought would take me back toward the car. But everything looked the same. I passed a ridge I was almost sure I'd seen before, but from the opposite side. I was walking in circles. I stopped, took off my pack, and just sat on a fallen log trying to breathe slow. I looked around and realized the trees were bending slightly, not from wind, but like they'd grown at an angle. The whole forest felt crooked. I was lightheaded, and I started thinking about turning my phone on to see if I could get a GPS signal, even though I'd kept it off to save battery. That's when I realized it wasn't in my pocket. I tore through the pack. It wasn't there either. I must have left it back at the last camp spot. That hit me harder than it should have. I stood there staring at the trees and felt this wave of panic wash over me. Not loud panic, just cold and sharp. I didn't even care about being lost. I just wanted to know someone could find me if things went really bad. But now I didn't have that. I had no connection to anything outside those woods. I walked until I couldn't anymore. My legs were trembling. I sat under a thick tree and leaned against the trunk, trying to stay calm. I hadn't seen the sun for hours, even though it wasn't sunset yet. The haze was thicker now. The light was dull and yellow, like it was shining through old plastic. I remember blinking hard, thinking something was wrong with my eyes. That night, I didn't set up the tent. I was too tired. I just wrapped myself in the tarp and lay flat on the ground. I don't think I really slept. My stomach was cramping, and I kept hearing that same scattered movement in the brush. It wasn't loud. It was like something trying not to be noticed. I started walking before dawn the next day. I didn't care which direction, I just needed to move. I followed a low ridge, hoping to find high ground or a clearing. Instead, I found something else. It was an old tree stand, not a new one. This was old, faded wood, half collapsed, nailed into the side of a thick tree with rusty metal brackets. There were empty beer cans scattered at the base. A crumpled plastic bag with torn snack wrappers inside. Someone had used this spot before, probably years ago. I climbed halfway up just to see if I could get a better view, but the top step broke off in my hand. I fell hard, landing on my side and twisting my ankle. It wasn't broken, but I couldn't put weight on it without wincing. I crawled back to the base and just sat there, sweat pouring down my face even though it was cold. My lips were cracked. I hadn't eaten more than a few bites of food in over a day. My water was almost gone. I knew I wasn't going to make it out unless I found the road or the stream again. I sat there staring at the ground until the light started fading. That night I heard footsteps, not animals, not wind. Slow, deliberate footsteps in the brush, crunching leaves. They stopped and started again, closer. I held my breath and didn't move. My fingers were wrapped tight around the small knife I'd kept on my belt. I didn't sleep at all, just sat there silent, waiting. In the morning, I found footprints in the soft ground. Not boots, not bare feet either, just deep impressions like someone had stood there for a while and shifted their weight. They led away from the tree stand into the thick brush. I didn't follow them. I turned the other way and started walking. I limped for hours that day. My ankle was swelling, and I had to use a broken branch as a crutch. I rationed the last bit of water. I knew I couldn't go another night out there. I pushed through the trees, following a ridge line I hoped would lead down towards something. Anything. And then, just before sunset, I saw it. Clearing. Not natural, a logging site. Overgrown and scattered with rusted equipment, but it meant I was close to the road. I pushed through the last line of trees and fell onto the gravel. I laid there for a long time, staring at the sky. I walked another hour before I saw the first tire tracks. And then, finally, the logging road. My car was still there, covered in dust and pine needles. The note on the dash was faded but still readable. I opened the door, sat down, and just breathed. I drove straight to the nearest hospital. They gave me fluids, patched up my foot, and said I was lucky I hadn't gone another day without water. I didn't tell them everything. I didn't tell them about the footprints or the tree stand or the way the woods felt wrong. I just said I got lost. But I still think about it all the time. Not the hunger, not the pain. The silence. The way it listened. Like something out there knew I was alone. And waited. I've always liked being out in the woods. I grew up in a small town in northern Michigan where most people hunted or fished or hiked on the weekends. By the time I was 16, I knew how to build a fire, navigate without GPS, and spend a couple nights out there with just a backpack. By 32, I had made solo trips into forests all across the state and even some out west. I wasn't careless. I brought a map, compass, gear, extra food, and I always left an itinerary with someone. I never tried to show off or push my luck. I just liked the quiet. It was late September when I planned the trip that went wrong. The kind of early fall where the trees are just starting to turn orange and the air feels thin and crisp. I had some PTO saved up and needed to clear my head, so I picked a remote section of state forest land a few hours north of where I lived. No trails, just raw woods, and no cell signal for miles. The plan was simple. Drive out Friday morning, hike deep in for most of the day, set up camp before dark, then stay out there until Sunday afternoon. I figured I'd fish a bit, maybe cook something over the fire, write in my notebook, and just let my brain relax. The morning I left, everything felt normal. I double-checked my pack. Tent, tarp, food, water filter, knife, compass, fire-starting gear, first aid, extra socks, and a small emergency beacon that worked off satellite. I had never used the beacon before and I didn't plan to, but it was good insurance. The weather was dry, low 60s during the day, mid 40s at night. I stopped for gas and a breakfast sandwich before getting onto the gravel access road that wound into the woods. The road got rougher the deeper I went. Trees pressed in close on both sides, and potholes made it slow going. I parked at a little pull-off about 4 miles in and got my pack out. No one else was around. I locked the car, noted the mileage and time, then started heading northwest into the forest. The first couple hours were easy walking. Pines gave way to thick maple groves, and the ground was soft with leaf litter. Birds chirped, squirrels rustled through the underbrush, and I even saw a buck standing still in the shade for a few seconds before bounding off. I took it slow, stopping to snack and take a few notes about the terrain. I wanted to reach a small ridge I saw on the topo map before making camp, so I kept moving. By mid-afternoon, I found a good spot near a low rise that overlooked a narrow creek. The water was cold and clean, and the area had enough clear space to set up my tent and still have room for a fire. I got everything laid out, filtered water, ate a late lunch, and settled in. As the sun dipped behind the trees, I got a small fire going, just enough for heat and comfort. I didn't really need it to cook. That first night was quiet, too quiet. Normally you hear owls or coyotes or wind in the trees, but after the fire died and I climbed into the tent, the silence felt heavy. It was like sound got swallowed up out there. I told myself it was just the density of the woods, maybe the shape of the terrain. Still, I didn't sleep great. I kept waking up to nothing. The next morning, I got up stiff and cold, but ready to explore. I packed a day bag and hiked upstream from camp for a couple miles, found an old animal trail and followed it uphill until I hit a small clearing. Took some notes, marked the GPS coordinates on my map just out of habit, then looped back toward camp. By mid-afternoon, I was filtering water again and thinking about what to cook. That's when I noticed the first thing that felt off. There were boot prints near the edge of the creek. Not mine. Too big. I wear size 10. These were probably 12s or 13s, and they weren't there yesterday. They came down the hill from the north and stopped right at the water before heading off into the woods east of my camp. No prints going back. Just a single set in, then gone. Now, it's public land, so I told myself someone else could have been out hiking. Maybe a hunter scouting early, but it still felt weird that I hadn't heard anything. No voices, no crunch of footsteps, nothing. And the prints looked fresh. I stared at them longer than I want to admit. I walked the direction they went for about 30 yards, but the leaves were too thick to follow. Then I came back, trying to shake the unease. That night, I skipped the fire, just cooked with my little stove and kept things quiet. I crawled into the tent early, but again, I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I heard movement. Not close, but not far either. It was the steady, careful kind of movement. Not a deer bounding or a raccoon rustling. Just a slow step, then another. I held my breath, Then nothing. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe not. In the morning, I got up and checked around camp. Nothing looked touched. The prints by the creek were still visible, but no new ones. Still, something felt wrong. I told myself I was overthinking. I had one more night, then I'd hike out. I should have left right then. That afternoon, I hiked a mile west, just to stay busy. Found some good flat stones by the water and sat there for a while, carving a bit on a stick and listening to the stream. Around 3 p.m., I headed back. As I neared camp, I stopped dead in my tracks. There was a piece of blue tarp tied to a branch near my tent. Not mine. I don't use blue tarps, and I didn't hang anything up. It was a strip about 2 feet long, knotted loosely. I scanned the trees, heart racing. Someone had been there, maybe while I was gone, maybe earlier. Either way, they left something behind. I untied it and stuffed it in my pack. I didn't like the message it sent, like someone wanted me to know they were there. At that point, I made up my mind to leave first thing in the morning. I had enough daylight left to hike out, but I'd already been out all day and didn't want to risk twisting an ankle trying to bushwhack in the dark. I didn't build a fire. I didn't even eat. I packed everything but the tent and kept my knife close. That night, I didn't sleep at all. Around 2 a.m., I heard the sound again. Movement. This time it was closer. Steady steps circling. Then nothing. Then the sound of twigs snapping off to the side, like someone shifting weight. Then breathing. I swear I heard breathing. I laid there, frozen, my hand on the knife handle. I didn't move, didn't make a sound. I waited until the sky started to turn gray with dawn. Then I finally moved. When I stepped out of the tent, I saw it. Another boot print, this time directly behind my tent. Just one. Like whoever was there had stood there, watching. I scanned the trees, heart hammering. Nothing moved. I packed fast. Ripped down the tent, didn't even fold it, just crammed it in the pack and took off. I didn't follow my inbound trail. I went straight southeast, the fastest line toward the access road. I moved fast, not even pacing myself. My body ran on fear. Every sound made me flinch. Every time a squirrel ran through the brush, I spun around. The woods felt wrong, like I was being watched the entire time. I finally hit the access road around noon. My legs were shaking. My shirt was soaked with sweat. When I reached my car, I half expected it to be broken into or gone, but it was there. I threw the pack in, locked the doors, and drove like hell until I got to a gas station on the highway. I sat there for a long time before calling anyone. I didn't report it. What would I say? Someone walked through my camp? Left a tarp scrap? Stood near my tent? It wasn't illegal. It was just unsettling. But I knew what I felt. I've spent years in the woods. I know the difference between animals, hikers, hunters. Whoever that was didn't want to be seen. They didn't talk. They didn't take anything. They just moved through the trees like they'd done it 100 times before. Like they were watching how I'd react. For weeks after I got back, I kept thinking about those prints. That blue tarp. The breathing. I had nightmares of someone crouching just behind a tree, just out of sight, not saying anything, not doing anything. Just waiting. Watching. I haven't gone back out alone since. I don't really talk about this, mostly because it sounds stupid when I try to explain it. But I think about it a lot. It wasn't some huge event like getting attacked by a bear or stumbling onto a crime scene or anything like that. Nothing that dramatic. But it scared the hell out of me, and it changed how I think about being alone in the woods. This happened a few years ago, and I still get that tight, gut-level feeling anytime I think about walking into a forest without telling someone exactly where I'm going and when I'll be back. I'd been out in western Pennsylvania visiting my uncle. He lives in this tiny town near the Allegheny National Forest. You could call it rural, but that doesn't really capture it. It's just woods and old homes and rough trails and dead-end roads that go nowhere. No cell service once you leave the main road, and the GPS starts getting weird real fast. I'd been staying at his place for a few days, helping him clean out an old barn he'd been meaning to tear down. On the last day, I had this plan to meet up with a buddy of mine from college who lived about 2 hours away. I didn't want to backtrack all the way to the highway, which curved out and around the entire forest like a big hook. On the map, it looked like I could shave off a big chunk of the trip if I cut straight across the forest roads. There was this old fire road that showed up on the satellite view, narrow as hell but supposedly drivable, and it looked like it connected back up with a paved route on the far side. It had cut about 40 minutes off the drive. It was July, and the forecast was dry. I figured it would be a rough dirt road at worst. I had a decent all-wheel drive Subaru, nothing fancy but good enough. I packed my stuff, said goodbye to my uncle, and headed out around 10 a.m. The first part was fine. The fire road was gravel and rutted, but I wasn't trying to race or anything. It wound between these long hills of pine and thick underbrush. At first, I'd passed the occasional hunting shack or overgrown side trail, and even saw a guy on a four-wheeler go by in the opposite direction. But the deeper I went, the less I saw. No houses, no signs, not even tire tracks. Just pine needles, dead leaves, and hard-packed mud. I had the windows down for a while, listening to the forest until it started to get creepy. The kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful, just empty. That hollow type of quiet that makes you feel like you're somewhere you shouldn't be. I turned the radio on low just to have some background noise, even though there was no signal. After about an hour of winding along that road, I came up on a downed tree blocking the path. It wasn't huge, but it was enough that I couldn't drive over or around it. I stopped, got out, and walked up to it. Looked like it had been there a while. No sign anyone had tried to clear it. I considered backing up, but there was no way I'd reverse the entire route without losing my mind. I checked the map again. It showed a smaller offshoot trail, maybe a quarter-mile back, that eventually looped around and met up with the road again on the other side of the hill. So I backed up to that turnoff and went for it. This side trail wasn't much more than 2 ruts in the dirt. My tires barely fit, and branches scraped both sides of the car. I had to go slow 5, maybe 10 miles an hour. I figured as long as I didn't hit anything, I'd be fine. But it started climbing, steeper and tighter with every turn. The trees got denser, moss on everything, no sunlight breaking through. Then the trail just kind of ended. It didn't stop suddenly, more like it slowly faded into overgrowth and rocks. The car started to struggle, wheels spinning a little as I tried to go forward. I gave up and stopped. GPS had frozen a mile back, and I hadn't seen any cell bars since early morning. I sat there for a minute with the engine idling, trying to decide what to do. I could try to reverse out, but the trail was too narrow. My bumper had already scraped a rock trying to turn around. I didn't want to tear up the undercarriage. I figured I'd hike ahead a bit and see how bad it looked. If the trail picked up again, I could maybe clear a path or mark something to guide me. I grabbed a bottle of water, locked the car, and started walking. I left a sweatshirt tied to a branch near the car just to mark the spot. Seemed smart at the time. The trail got worse the farther I went. Overgrown, muddy, cluttered with fallen limbs and wet leaves. My shoes were soaked in 15 minutes. I stepped over a rock ledge, then down a narrow slope that curved around a thick stand of pine, and after that, the trail just vanished completely. I figured I'd turn back. The slope was steep, and I hadn't gone more than half a mile. But when I turned around, everything looked different. I didn't see the rock ledge. I didn't see my footprints. I turned left, thinking maybe I'd wandered off a little and just needed to reorient. But that didn't help. I went another 10 minutes, then stopped. The woods were completely silent. Not a single bird or bug. Just trees and brush and moss. My phone showed no bars and no GPS. I held it above my head like an idiot for a while, hoping it would catch something. That's when I realized I didn't know where I was. Not just lost, fully, completely turned around. And I wasn't sure how far the road was now. I'd gone downhill and uphill again. The sun was directly overhead, but the trees blocked enough light that I couldn't tell which way was east. I didn't panic, not at first. I told myself I'd just walk in one direction for a bit, then switch if it didn't look right. So I picked a direction and kept going, using broken branches and rocks to mark where I'd been. But after maybe an hour, everything still looked the same. The ground was soft in some places, harder in others. Roots everywhere. I saw a deer skull lodged in the crook of a tree, fresh enough to still stink. I stepped into a swampy patch and sunk ankle-deep in black mud. My shoes pulled off when I tried to lift my feet. I had to dig them out with my hands, and I dropped my water bottle doing it. It rolled out of sight somewhere in the brush. By mid-afternoon, I was sweating through my shirt and starting to feel it. My thighs ached from the uphill climbs. My hands were scratched to hell. At one point, I slipped and landed hard on my side, knocking the wind out of me. I sat there a long time after that, just sat there listening. That's when I heard something. It was faint, like a metallic thud. Not rhythm, not constant, but not natural either. I thought maybe it was my car. Someone had found it, or maybe a truck passed close by. I stood and tried to move toward the sound, but it vanished. A few minutes later, I heard it again, but behind me this time. Just one single sound, like metal hitting metal, then silence. It happened 3 more times over the next hour, always faint and distant and never in the same direction. And that's when the panic started. I tried calling out a few times, thinking maybe someone was nearby, but my voice felt wrong in the air, like it didn't belong. I didn't hear an echo, just silence, and that feeling of being watched started creeping in. I didn't run, not yet, but I walked faster, ignored the branches smacking my face and arms. My ankle started to throb from where I'd twisted it on a rock. I could feel it swelling inside my shoe. And then, without warning, I stumbled onto an old campsite. Not fresh. The fire ring was collapsed, and the tarp that had once been a shelter was torn and half buried under leaves. Rusted food cans, a boot, some shredded fabric. I didn't linger. I moved downhill and tried to find water. I figured if I could find a stream or river, I could follow it out. That's what people say, right? Water leads to civilization. After another hour of trudging, I did find water, but it wasn't much more than a slow, brown trickle, maybe a foot wide. I followed it anyway. By then, the light had started to change. That dull gold that means the day's ending. I had no flashlight, no food. My clothes were soaked with sweat and swamp water. I kept walking. The last clear thing I remember was hearing that sound again. But this time it was close, really close. Metal on metal, like a tool being dropped, or a shovel, maybe 20 feet off in the trees. I didn't go toward it. I moved the opposite way, fast, tripping, falling, trying to stay upright. I don't remember choosing a direction. I just remember moving. And then, somehow I was back on the trail. Not the car, but a trail, a real one, wide enough for a four-wheeler. Fresh tire tracks in the dirt. I don't know how I got there. I must have looped back somehow. The sun was just above the horizon, that deep orange glare through the trees. I followed the tracks, kept walking until my legs felt like rubber. Right before dark, I saw a hunting shack through the trees. A real one, metal roof, plywood walls, locked and empty, but I sat under the overhang for the night. I didn't sleep. I just waited for daylight. I found my car the next morning. I followed the main trail back around the hill and saw my sweatshirt still tied to the branch. I opened the car, sat in the seat, and just breathed for a long time. Then I started the engine and didn't stop driving until I hit the highway. Didn't even stop to pee. I got home later that night. I didn't tell my uncle. I didn't call my buddy. I just took a shower, threw away my clothes, and sat on the floor of my apartment for hours.